So as we start with this default MVC app, like I said, it's got a lot of stuff that maybe we don't need, but it does seem a little bit easier than building it all from scratch. And so let's go in and just do a basic cleanup like I do when I'm building an app. And so you can close this overview screen, although it does have good information here. You shouldn't just skip over this. Like if you have questions, Microsoft's documentation is really good in terms of helping you learn this stuff. But I'll go ahead and close this overview page. And then I just kind of go through and say, well, what do I need or not need? And part of my reason for going through what we did in the last couple series of videos was to show you what we need. And so by default, you should know what we don't need because you saw what we need. And so I just kind of start running through. So the www root folder, I probably will end up doing CSS and JavaScript and Bootstrap and jQuery. And so I'm just going to leave that all as is. As I look at the controllers, this has a lot more code than what we had seen. And so I just say, well, what do I need or not need? And so it creates actions for both privacy and error, which are related to views. In the views folder, there's a privacy view and an error view. But those weren't in the little default project we created. We don't need those. It's good. It's good to have a privacy statement on your website, and maybe at some point we will. And it's good to have a little page that shows you, any errors that occurred. But we don't necessarily need those for our app. And so the first thing I do is I go in and just take out our little privacy view, take out our validation scripts, and the error view, and I will use the shared layout, so I'm going to leave that intact. I will use the view imports file, the view start. All of these things are helpful to us as we're creating our programs, but I can get rid of that stuff that I'm not going to use. And so when I go back into the home controller, well, if there's no privacy view, I don't need a privacy action. I can get rid of that. If there's no error view, I don't need this error action. I can get rid of that. What about this stuff? What's this doing? Man, I sure hope that even though I don't expect you to understand what this necessarily does, I hope you can read it. And so as we look at this class, again, we talked about the namespace, which is the overarching name of the project. And this is the sub, directory, so to speak, of controllers. And then we have a public class, home controller. So that's the name of the class. This is a container that's going to contain this code, and it inherits from the controller class. So instead of saying inherits or extends or anything like that, we just use the colon there. That is inheriting from that controller class. And then as I look at this, I don't know what it is necessarily, but I can see it's a private variable, private object as it turns out. It's read-only, so it's not supposed to be changed. And it's of type iLogger. I don't expect you to know, and I don't know what an iLogger is necessarily. We can get a hint by hovering over it, and it will tell us this is a generic interface for logging where the category name is derived from the specified home controller type name. And so we can go in and try and figure out what it's doing. But hopefully we can read that this is an iLogger class that's a class like we're creating here, a class home controller. This is an iLogger class, and then these angle brackets indicate the type. So just like we did with lists, where we said list, but then in angle brackets we said of type string or of type int or whatever it was we were keeping track of when we did the dynamic arrays. So list of type whatever, it's doing the same thing here. This is an iLogger of type home controller. And so it's creating an instance of the home controller class, and that's what it's logging information for. And then the name of it that has been given, which could be whatever, is underscore and then the name of it. Now we'll talk more about what that underscore means later on, but it's just a naming convention. And then how is that used? Well, what's this class? It's called home controller. It doesn't return any information, but home controller is the same name as the name of the class, and it's being passed in an iLogger of type home controller called logger. What is this? Man, I hope you're saying that's a constructor. It's a constructor for this class. And it's receiving this information of type logger, and that's a temporary thing. We could call this temp. And it's taking the thing that was passed in temporarily and setting it to something that the whole class can see, an object of the same type set up here that we can see throughout the class. And so again, I don't expect you to know what it is, but I do hope that you can read it. Right? We're just like, learning to read a language or something like that. Hopefully you can start to read, what it's doing and try to interpret that. Did we need it for our little app we built? No, we didn't need it, so we can get rid of this for now. Now we'll end up using the constructor later on, but we can get rid of it for now. And so now our controller just has this information. If I go look at the rest of the files, the program CS file has that default stuff that we ended up putting in. I was just trying to decide. We didn't ever go over this is development, and this is just something we can set up in the project. Can I remember off the top of my head where it is? The answer is probably not. I think it's in properties under debug, maybe. But we can just tell the app, are we in development mode or are we in production mode? In other words, do we want to see the big nasty error? I'll have to figure out where it is. Do we want to see the big nasty error? And in development, we do. If we get an error on the website, we want to see all that nasty code that says there was this error and it puts in a snippet of what was going on at the time and everything. Or do we want a nice little thing that says, oh, sorry, there was an error, right? And so if we're not in development mode, it's showing that nice page that it had created before that we deleted, that shows the user a nice error instead of all the, the code and everything that goes on behind it. And so I'll figure out where that is and we can look at it at some point. It's not really critical for what we're doing here, but we can set our mode. Are we in development or are we in production? And if we're not in development, then it's going to give them the nice error is what that's saying. And so we're almost there. I'll save that. Let's close out. So this is program CS. Now if I try to run this, then I'll choose, again, I want you to use IIS Express, which is the emulating a server way of running it. And I run this. And it takes a minute to run. I dated a girl one time and man, she would take a long time to get ready. Like 3 or 4 hours to get ready. It was always, and we were always late for everything. Crazy. All right, so anyway, we've got a little website here. And so without those views, now obviously we click on the privacy view, it's not going to do anything at this point. And there's this peripheral stuff we can get rid of in a minute. We may not use this exact same format, but now we've got kind of our default app. I will do one other thing. In the shared layout, we do want to use the shared layout, but it's got maybe a lot of stuff that we don't necessarily need. No, I think I'm actually going to leave it intact for now. We can manipulate that as we need to along the way. It's not hurting anything right now to set it up the way it is. And so that's our little cleaned up app that we can now jump off from to go build whatever it is we're going to build. And it's already got built in that little navigation and headers and footers, and so we can just go change it for what we need. And so it's nice. It's got this template set up for us. It's done a bunch of the work for us, and now we can go in and actually build our app. Spencer out.